Do you want to just kick it off?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, let's get started. So I'll start. Hi everyone, and thank you so much for coming. Welcome to our virtual artist talk discussing the Big Flat Now, currently being shown in the window of our project space at 128 Baxter Street. My name is Alex Schlechter, and I'm the program coordinator at Baxter Street. And I'm very excited to provide the introduction for tonight's conversation. The conversation will be held between artist Marco Scozzaro and curators Flyweight Projects, Clare, Torina, and Cesario. This conversation will be preceded by a brief Q&A portion using the chat feature, so I would encourage you to post questions to the message board while the conversation is happening. Thank you again for tuning in tonight, and I will now pass over the stage to Jesse and Claire of Flyweight Projects.
Hi everyone. Hello.
Hello. Welcome.
Thanks for coming this evening. We're all being recorded right now, so I think that's very helpful. It's good. We're going to talk more about that later. The creation of documents through COVID. So a brief introduction to Flyweight. We created a space. It's about this big at the beginning of 2019. It's located in our apartment, and oh, Jesse, you want to show it?
Yeah, I'll pan up. So this is a 1:12 scale gallery. So 1 inch in the gallery equates to a foot in real life.
In real life. We made this as really a response to high cost in New York. But there's a lot of reasons. I think it is very freeing to a lot of artists to imagine what they could do in a 700 square foot space, is the size of it normally. So in addition to this one we have in our apartment, we also made a 2-scale mobile version of it that can move around the city freely. And so that's the version, that's the room that's now in the window of Baxter Street. And so we operate like a traditional gallery where we have shows like every month to 6 weeks, but it's much more relaxed, and we try to put less pressures on the artists. So basically, if we get into a conversation with an artist having a show with us, it's up to them to what extent they want to write about their work, title their work, sell their work, have an artist talk or Zoom. And we just like to leave that up to them. So you don't have the constraints of like, well, the dealer, the gallery wouldn't paint the walls in like total chroma key blue, or like the dealer doesn't like my new body of work, etc. It's more of a space for experimentation.
Low pressure.
Yeah, super low pressure.
Freedom.
And like easy schedule.
So Marco is an artist that we've wanted to work with for a while, and that conversation about having a show started in around January. We'd been following his work since his solo show at Baxter Street, where he was a resident. And we thought that his experimental nature would work well in our strange Flyweight space. There's a fluidity to his multi-dimensional practice where he often blurs the lines between, different mediums, analog, digital, everything in between. And for Flyweight, where the documentation of the shows is really important because most people can't actually see the space that's in our apartment, the possibilities for building things and bringing them off the wall, making sculptures, really open up a lot of possibilities for the artist. So we were really interested to see what Marco, as an artist of many means, many facets would make.
Yeah. So for this talk, we're gonna hand it off to Marco in his studio, and then he's gonna show some like behind the scenes stuff, which there's a lot of it. Different iterations the show can go through because it's small. But I'll give a brief bio on Marco before we pass it over to him. So Marco Scozzaro, he received his MA in psychology from the University of Parma. And then what brought him to New York, we just learned a decade ago, so happy New York anniversary, was that he was the photo global artist in residence at SBA, where he now teaches. He was also a mentor in the immigrant artist program at NYFA. And he's done residencies at Signal Culture, Bronx Museum of the Arts, as well as Baxter Street, where he had a solo show. He has received grants, experimental media and film grant from the Institute of Electronic Arts at Alfred University, and then also a media arts fellowship from BRIC in Brooklyn. So that's a real short version. Marco is busy, but we'll pass it over to you and start the conversation. Can we hear you?
All right, guys. Thank you so much for the nice words. The project took basically a different. So let's start from the beginning. So Claire and Jesse, we've been in conversation for a while, and they asked me. So very organically, it was like, hey, why don't we do something together? We are curating this Flyweight thing. We have small shows, and of course, I was very interested in like trying something new and something different. And so we informally started talking, and just have an exchange of ideas, and then basically the pandemic happened, and we, especially the first few weeks, we were like, all of us, we didn't know what was happening. We were very scared, and at the same time we still wanted to do something, but we didn't know how to do it. And a lot of people started doing like Zoom events and like this one, and thinking about how art can be delivered in a digital form. I think that the specific idea of this project is strictly physical, so we wanted to keep that dimension, and so we started like basically brainstorming. So where we can have the space, we can definitely not have it in our place. Claire and Jesse said, because for obvious safety reasons, and we couldn't have it.
Wanting to do it in your studio and doing like a studio opening, and there was a time period at the end of March where it was like maybe in June things will open back up, but in that like optimistic time period. But yeah, it became that we were looking for maybe a deli, like maybe somewhere that we can have it that like relates to the project, and the Baxter space just became so obvious. It's like a beautiful window in a populated street.
Yeah, so with the idea of like having the installation in the window instead of like in a closed space, so that everyone could, even during the quarantine lockdown early days, you could go out for maybe a walk and see it, and then with your mask and gloves and everything. So yeah. Baxter was a good option because I was a resident there. Jesse and it's related to there. He works there, so it was a good idea. And so we started thinking about, okay, let's have this piece in the window in a very the city was really empty at that time, so it was even more interesting to think about a show basically for nobody, like we were all locked in, and so it was kind of like this metaphysical thing of having like a window in an empty street with like an installation with like all this colorful and like hectic flashes and videos and all this things. So we decided to do it anyway. Then for the moment wasn't right, and the protest happened, so it was the show was put on a hiatus, and then now it's it's up again. And I think it's important for this kind of the way we worked to show you guys some document that we exchanged and we collected during the genesis of the installation. So we started with some ideas, some sketches, and I started sending Jess and Claire a couple of like 3D renderings of like how I imagine the installation for the space. So I'm gonna share some of this. Let me see. Okay, so this was the first 3D render of the installation, and it's white wall. There's a carpet, there's a sculptural piece, and there's a flag. And the idea was like, and a projection, a big projection on the wall. This was the first idea, thinking about like a kind of a big museum hall. This would be this was the first idea. The sculpture is basically like plexi and like a very thick plexi. In reality, would be like more than a foot thick, and like something like 8 or 9, 9 actually, yeah, 7, yeah, 8 feet tall, something like that. So this was the first iteration, and then we exchanged ideas. And at some point I thought about like a previous idea that I had for an installation that was like all blue walls, like chroma key, also in reference to the videos, the experimental videos that I made. And so we tried something like that. Before that, there was another version with like a bigger flag, and I think the third, but this is pretty much the same, but I think the third version was this one, where there was we realized that the video projection in the small space would have been like a little tricky to do. So we thought about like a big monitor that in the metaphor of the big museum room would be like a video wall, like a huge video wall. So at first there was this video wall that was like leaning on the other two walls, and like the sculpture, the plexi sculpture, and the flag.
Yeah, what's interesting is like Flyweight has a lot of possibilities that can be made. Like, you can make this flag that seems huge but is actually tiny, blah blah blah. But like something like getting a projector into the tiny space is nearly impossible. So we were like, we figure out how to do a faux projection and a monitor. Very awesome.
Well, also because like the projector would have like been in the open, in the fourth wall basically, and so like obstructing the view of the rest of the things basically.
Mm-hmm. Which is totally fine if the show exists primarily in photographs, which sometimes they do.
No, exactly.
They're just not people. I mean, like most art shows, we mostly see art in images.
So this was this was like the final render, and then we started kind of a back and forth. Again, I was in my studio and they were at Baxter, and they were studying, like putting together the pieces. They came to pick up like all the parts in my studio, like masks and stuff. And so in the studio, they started, putting together all the parts and sending me this like snapshot, like, how do you like it? Like white walls and, this position, the flag in the back, or the flag on the side, or, little details, testing position of the monitor straight to the wall. And then maybe one wall can be blue instead of all the others. So, like you test different, different version until you find the one that you like.
Sometimes when there's less pieces, it takes you even longer because there's no obvious way to put 3 pieces in a room.
Yeah,
exactly.
Figure out how does this flow the right way. to get to the big flat now concept as well.
Yeah, exactly. So like, of course, like in the 3D version, like the the flag is a little smaller and the monitor is a little thicker. And then we decided to do everything blue, and position everything. Of course, the flag, both the flag and the sculpture are double-sided. There's two different images, and depending on the angle, you can tell. Probably right now, it's impossible to see the back of the flag from the window at Baxter, but it's good to know that there's another piece, and this is the final approval of the piece. Something interesting is like the way we were talking, it was like by text or and like, okay, this was like my notes. Okay, hey, I would avoid that, like the space in between, and like I like that. I like that too. So I thought it was like nice behind the scene of the project. And then the actual setup was like, this was
recorded against our knowledge, but
yeah. I you guys can sue me. Like I don't have like I don't have a release, but basically this was like a screen recording of my iPhone while we were installing, basically this is the remote install. So Jesse was moving by the 1/8 of an inch, and I was like, okay, yeah, this is good, this is not good. And
also shows how adaptable your work is, that like there's a million positions we could have put this into, and they all might have read a different way and made sense, but
also to that end, like Marco is very specific about which. Oh, so actually, Marco, we have a question for you.
Yeah,
in the
sure.
Chat. A drop-in question. Can you talk about how and why you made the leap from psychology to visual art? And does your background in psychology make its way into your work now?
Well, it was a good question. Definitely, I think definitely my study influenced my my perception. Should we keep this video or should we go on live? What do you think?
We can let
however you want.
While you answer the question.
Yeah, let's leave it. Well, I think like probably unconsciously, the more I get older, the more I realize that it's not that unconscious. It becomes more conscious. That there's a psychological dimension in my work. From the early work, there was more figurative to the most recent work that is more abstract. There's always like either a psychological tension or like some attention to the perception and all psychological mechanism. The transition, I mean, I've always been interested in art, and I have a background in music and visual arts. I started doing working with like photography and collage when I was probably in high school, something like that. I didn't study art at that time, although I was already making art. I guess the only formal arts, only academic and formal art education was at SVA here in New York during that year of where I was like artist in resident and basically student at the same time. So like that was kind of a weird program, something in between like a study program and an artist residency. But yeah, I hope this answered your question. It wasn't, at some point after I graduated, I realized that I didn't see myself in that career, in that life. And although some of the studies are still important for what I do, I decided to just pursue, at that time it was photography. I started working, assisting photographers and start my career as a commercial photographer, and on the side continuing my art project that I was already, having my shows in Italy and in Europe. I had shows in Paris and in Macedonia. So yeah, it was kind of like a smooth transition at the time when I was studying, and then at some point I decided that I needed to change and try to pursue what was really what I wanted to do.
How do you think your work changed at all when you moved to New York and were sort of getting used to living here, being an artist here?
Can you rephrase the question? Like, how do you?
Do you think it changed your work to move to New York, to relocate to New York?
Well, of course, yeah. I mean, I moved to New York because I was curious to understand this culture better. Let's go live. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. I was born in 79. I grew up in Italy with a lot of like American models, starting from like the basic like sitcoms, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and that kind of stuff. So you grew up and TV was very heavy when I was a kid, and for a young kid, like Images and was like MTV. Actually, like the Italian version was Video Music. We had like music video all day long, and then you had like this like American sitcom where you could see like the kind of fashion, the kind of like lifestyle. So I guess my old generation was completely Americanized, and then when I got a little older, more connected to like underground subcultures like hardcore punk, and especially, of course, I became like a little more critical about that idea. So when I was like older, it was like, okay, I think I want to go there. I want to see how it is, and kind of like seeing the contradiction that also wearing me about like this culture, and of course my work changed. At the beginning, I was kind of adapting, and my work was more about what I left in Italy in a way. So there was like an early project called Maggio, was kind of like not really documentary, but like more kind of like open narrative, very very psychological about like this transition from Italy to the US. And then I started like observing all these elements that I realized were part of me, and I was critical about, and I wanted to make work about that. So like that's how the whole conversation, the whole idea of like the stereotypical language and what I'm basically researching now, what I've been doing for a few years. I think it's the core of my work, and I needed to be here to do that work, because I think like some of the topics that I address relate to a certain kind of like commercial image, and generic image related to the commercial world, that for me those were kind of American models in a way. So I, when I saw pop art in a museum or in a show when I was a kid, that was very liberating for me, because like at that time when you're a kid, it's like, okay, we're gonna visit another church, you know what I mean, and we're gonna visit another like Greek temple, which is like, at the time you want to see something colorful, and you have like all this like ancient art, and so there was both things were part of me. Of course, when I was a kid, I was more interested in the colorful stuff. Now I'm interested in both. And I find myself like, and I find like contradiction in myself, and try to balance this two, two sides and these two things. So like the classical world and a more kind of like artificial and like kind of like glossy aesthetics. So definitely it was kind of, this was like a very long answer, but like the concept, that's the concept basically. Actually, I have this thing here that I want to show you. So this is a record from American Records Modena. So this is a record label from my hometown in Italy, called American Records. So that, I think it, and I just found this record which I was looking for. So this is a symbol of like how like the that time where I grew up were heavily Americanized, and in good and bad. I'm not saying so that there was a huge influence, and I wanted to just like understand better this culture. That's why and you can only understand the culture if you live within the culture. It's not just like watching movies and stuff. You have to have a better idea if you live there. So that's definitely how living in New York influenced my my work.
You want to discuss the Digital Deli project a little bit?
Yeah.
Maybe starting with the book, and then because that is so relevant to the way that this show came about and the way that this show ended up looking as like a branching off of that.
Yeah. Well, so Digital Deli, there was the show that basically I think you guys started to know my work. It was after a residency at Baxter Street, and it was like basically my first research on the generic on the generic image, on the on the current visual vernacular, and on the layering of different images, the constant layering of different images that we see nowadays. So basically, every picture, if we think at an image, if you think at every picture that we perceive now, it's always like the result of a juxtaposition and layering of other images. So it becomes like kind of a new image made of fragments of other images. And so thinking about that, thinking about exploring the commercial signage, all these elements that for me are the Digital Deli. So like a mix of like kitsch, commercial signage, and generic imagery, and glossy advertising, but also like I don't know how to say, very practical commercial signage. I started putting together this project, and I wanted to make a book that was the idea of the book came at the same time of the idea of the show. The show is an installation. The installation uses the metaphor of a digital deli. So like this kind of like grocery store, this like corner store where you can find everything and anything. And so there's like this metaphor of like images, pictures that are like scattered in space, just like commodities. So there's also like a reference of like how images circulate on the digital network. And there are all this like, all these ideas. But at the same time, I wanted to make a book, and the book explores this like idea of like being multi-layered. And so every image is as a small size, as a different size, different scale. And this is also in an exhibition space. The images have different size. So the idea was like kind of the conundrum of the image picture in picture, used in video, but also like in photography. And so having like fragments of images that communicate between each other and create like a new image. So this was like the beginning of like the exploring layering and how images taken from like really sometimes different contexts. Sometimes they're images that I made in the studio. Sometimes it's like kind of like a touristy kind of portrait. Sometimes they're like just a glitch from my computer, or a, you know, still life that kind of mimic a commercial still life, but really there's no product that I'm selling. It's more about the expectations. It's more about you know, it's not about the burger that you're trying to sell, because there's no burger. It's more about like the expectation of the, you know, the advertisement and like the commercial. The whole work kind of like explores this high level of expectation that we expect that you connect to photography. So the multi-layer
is that these images you're already playing with like a lot of different layering, a lot of you know, switching the guise of what this image is about, and then following the book you start doing like all of these extra ad infinitum like layering moments where you're taking these images that are already you know, deconstructed, reconstructed, and then you're doing it even further with the like the metallic prints.
Yeah, absolutely. So we go from here to the Big Flat Now. So this was like an early iteration of like the Big Flat Now, and it's like this time I wanted to have like all the pictures the same size, kind of like having some sort of order, because like in the frame you see all the different size. So like the layering and the juxtaposition now, they are in the same image, and you can have like, you know, cues of like
shadows,
you know, shadows, fake Photoshop shadows or glows and all this kind of stuff. And you know, it's metallic paper, kind of like in a way mimicking whatever. It can be like you know, like a super glossy monitor of our computers. But the idea is that like now all the images are compressed and they're there. So this is why it's the Big Flat Now. So all the images are on the same plane. But the important thing about that kind of like shortcut that you were mentioning is that like this is the Big Flat Now, but in the real space, the Big Flat Now becomes like a three-dimensional installation. So again, there's like this back and forth between you know, opposite juxtapositions and sometimes dichotomies that coexist. So like, okay, the Big Flat Now becomes like a three-dimensional installation when there's like still pictures, there's moving pictures, and so I wanted the picture to become an object.
You want to show some of the images from the installation?
Oh yeah, sure.
Also, a big question that came in sort of related to that. A very good question. And I'll read it as it was asked. It seems like you're interested in making flat images three-dimensional. So big question, do you have any thoughts about how to unflat our current culture?
Wow, this is a very interesting question, and I think it's very on point, because I guess my interest in making picture three-dimensional, it's a reflect. I mean, speaking of like a psychological dimension, I think it's a way to address that flatness that it's very embedded in our society right now. I mean, I didn't want to make that statement explicit, but it seems like other people can see that. I don't have an answer to that. I guess like my research is a way to address that, and if someone like you, I don't see the chat. Sorry. If someone like the person who asked the question feel the need to ask that question. I guess like probably my work touched the right point. I prefer to ask question instead of like answering with my work. So I don't have a solution, but I think it's important that as an artist and also as a human being, we have to, continue to inquire and try to figure out what is happening. But yeah.
It's been interesting because like, we started having conversations maybe like 6 months ago, maybe 8 months ago. And there is something that like, I mean, it just, the world got more and more complicated and more, dichotomies are just like in our everyday lives now versus in an art conversation. It's just conversations between your family or what, not to get into all that. But it's interesting, like the artists who sort of I started thinking about during all this as, not being aesthetic or something, but it really created a lens in artworks that I hadn't thought about that way before. I mean, yours is one of them too.
Yeah.
Like there's something about this like disorientation of all the images and the saturation that, I feel like maybe the world was just like going along and like evolving into the screen in a very frustrating way for photographers, but like to everyone else was like, okay, the new thing, we're gonna get this now. And then all of a sudden, like during all this, everyone's like questioning everything. And it's been interesting to have all these conversations with like non-artists and non-psychologists in visual psychology or what have you.
Well, I mean, I think one of the it's not a solution, but I definitely something that I address with my work that I think it's a possible strategy to approach this issues as like using humor and I think not taking ourselves too seriously, it's a good strategy to talk about serious thing without being boring, without being too serious. So this is I think that the big fight now, there's a lot of like hints in the images, but also in the title, and also like in the fact that it's a 3D installation of pictures, and it talks about pictures, and it uses the metaphor of pictures to talk about our society in general. But I think like the funny aspect of the work, I think, is the key to really talk about something without being too creating like a super heavy conversation. So the thing that I'm interested in the work, in this work, and also in other work that I like, is like when it's multi-layered, not only visually but also like in there's a different layers of meaning that you can explore, and it depends on the viewer and the audience to just attach the meaning or like grasp the meaning that they wanna they're interested in. So like sure, they are funny and colorful images, but they are also a reflection of something that it's not necessarily super funny. So like it's I like playing with that, and I think that's the good thing about humor, that sometimes you can just by smiling you can be you can say very serious things.
Marco, in a past interview you had done, you had said that the first layer of your images can be very funny, but if you dig deeper, they're not as accessible. And I wonder how you feel this show, recontextualizes its own accessibility, because it's obviously on the street. People can look at it 24/7. It's always on. The video is always running. The light's always on. So it's both like an accessible show in many ways, but then also there are these other things that are maybe larger concepts or deeper concepts that could be more difficult to access. How do you feel this show kind of tackled that?
Well, I mean, I don't think that the show is more accessible from this meaning. I mean, I don't know. This is a question that I would ask like the different viewers. If there was a way to ask different viewers, sampling the viewers what they think. For me and for some feedback that I have, it's pretty explicit what the work is about. But again, the good thing about the way I work with this project is that it's really accessible to a very diverse audience. So again, like a kid, my daughter loves these images, and she's 4 years old, and she thinks they're funny. And I mean, she likes colors. When I ask her, like, do you like this picture? She says, yeah, I love the colors.
Mhm.
Which is, it is very interesting because like as an artist, I'm of course interested in making something beautiful, something that I like, even though the source of my work sometimes are like images that I question. But I question these images because like even if they are kitsch, even if they are redundant, even if they are like very forgotten, they're I feel attracted to them. So like I sample those images that I feel attracted to, not those images that I don't like. And then I can use those images like whatever, recontextualizing or like deconstructing and recreating in the studio to my means. But like if you sample like a commercial image and you put it in a different context, of course, you raise question about that word. You raise question about like the power of seduction of like the image making culture, image making industry, and so, and again, these are all like conflicting feelings because I am also a commercial professional photographer. So like I see this dichotomy again every day. So like I can question an image, but I can like that image at the same time. I can I love I collect magazine, and like even older magazines, like pile of magazines there, and records, and all this like printed ephemera. And sometimes I keep older magazine mostly for their advertisement more than like the content. And so like is it of course it's clear what that advertising is trying to deliver, but at the same time it's a great image, and I and I feel attracted to that. So sometimes I sample it, I rephotograph it, I use it. But I think it's important to just keep that, being honest and try to understand what the different image means. So that's why in the Big Flat now, I'm trying to create this like shortcut, because you really don't understand what is going on here, and this is what I'm trying to address. That like the circulation of images in a digital network and social media, the way we are perceiving it nowadays, it can be potentially dangerous in a way where we don't understand what the single images are. I remember like talking to like younger friends, like, oh yeah, this is like I don't know, Reineke Dijkstra's picture. Oh, I found it, this was like years and years ago. Yeah, I see it on Tumblrs everywhere, but I didn't know who was this image. You know what I mean? So like, and this is even more common nowadays because like pictures get reposted and every day. But I'm not against reposting or appropriating. That would be like very it would be ridiculous of me. But I'm interested in like how an image can change the meaning in a different context, and that's why I'm forcing like the remotion of like a context that give any clues of how you can read the image. So like in a way I'm forcing people to think about this thing. And at the end of the day, the work is about identity. It's about like us as in this time. It's about the now, of course, and it's about the specific moment. It's a conversation about images and image culture, but it's also a conversation about like, you know, monoculture and you know, like the danger of like you know, us thinking all the same way. So in a way, by using this very this multitude, and like, you know, this is like another way of presenting my images. This is kind of like my mood board, or like images, current or less current, that, you know, I put in this wall, and I constantly rearrange. I put new images, I take off images, I rephotograph, and like, just for me to see how my work function within the work. So like putting together a different work. Sometimes I can put like an older image, and again, like, it's important for me to go back to my archive, and or you know, sometimes I have like other pictures, appropriated pictures that I can sample and use the work, and then I put in the board, and I see how they work. There are a few here. So again, yeah, by mixing all these elements, I think it becomes clear what I'm trying to do. And if it's not, it's good enough that people like the images, or if they don't like it, maybe just the confusion that comes from like looking at the picture and not understanding. It's already like, you know, a little bit of reflection, a little bit of something that you know, I guess it's like, it's the beginning of like try to have that conversation.
Mhm.
I don't know if that answers the question.
And it made me think of, you know, us watching people walk by your show on Baxter Street, and then I guess when I think about it, it's like, you know, the advertising industry takes from artists, individual artists, constantly, and, you know, removes the context of that artist, puts text on it in some form. You know, maybe they remake it like we do with, like, artists appropriate things all the time, but to the end that it's a commercial product. And then some, you know, with your work, I'm like, well, it's taking it back. Like, you're taking it back, removing the signage, and then putting it in a window where people walk by and they have no idea what they're being sold. It's like very
Exactly. That's a good point. But I think the whole idea of like appropriation, when it started, that it was that's the core. So like, okay, so there's a mechanism in a specific industry that appropriates images or production methods from artists, and use those just for to make money. And I think like the early artists that started appropriating, and that was the thing. So like, okay, let's just like do the same thing, appropriating from the commercial world, from like the advertising world, to show what this is doing. And sometimes like without an explicit comment, that's why I guess it became powerful. And when you know, the accusation of like you know, people using other people images wasn't just like there was no conversation, in a way. Sorry guys, I'm a little tired, but the point is like, it is very clear why appropriation was used as a production method in the art, to, you know, of course, to subvert what the commercial world advertising was doing before, taking from other people, you know what I mean? So like, and I think it's interesting. And what is interesting about art is just like making a comment without being explicit. Otherwise that becomes like, you know, it becomes boring. So like the way you do it is just like you make something new, and transformative. That this is the legal term, and you put in the word again, so you can start a conversation again. And again, like all of, you know,
You definitely achieved that
I
through
really,
like transforming the space and the space being where it is.
but just in general, I have so much to say about that. That's another conversation.
Yeah.
But
No, exactly. This is a whole, this is a bigger conversation with different layers in that too. But for what concerns my work, this is what this is my view on it. So like, just using those methods in a different context, just to, you know, just like start a conversation.
yeah, I think
I mean, hopefully the installation will start this conversation.
it's also just that there's like, you know, for artists in this climate, I think there's no chance of like having a career off like one idea anymore. You know, I feel like that was a thing. Like I think my father did that, and many of his like artist friends did that. Many like of my teachers were able to do that. But I think there's a point now where like information is moving so fast between people, and the images are being taken and like adored, and then like sort of like naively taken too. So just from like a personal perspective as an artist, and something about Flyweight, because like obviously we borrowed a model, you know, to make this. It's still like as clean a slate as we could possibly think of. You know, there's no such thing as like a sacred,
neutral
space anymore. And the same with like if you're working in representation, you know, you sort of like have this idea about this like lexicon that maybe you want to use, you like reference these things, and these things seem like untouched, or like they need to have more said about them. But then all of a sudden you see them in an advertisement, and you're like, oh, okay, then we start over. Like, and
because the speed at which
things go. And you know, we do think about that a lot with Flyweight. And I guess, you know, our goal is to just see like the space change as much as possible from show to show, and as it goes forward.
And
but also, yeah, no, go ahead. Sorry, Jess.
Oh no, I was just saying, in the transformation there, and the location were, I don't know.
Yeah,
they're really.
It was a big
they're very
like
interactive
really
and like very active. And,
yeah.
But I think, you know, like again, like going back to, you know, the arts and the different industries, there's always like a back and forth, and there's a constant conversation in I wouldn't necessarily put in like appropriation or not appropriation, but it's especially nowadays it would be like absurd to say that, you know, there's no cross-pollination of like all the different realm of like our life. It's art, design, or fashion, and commerce, and all these things. So I think we all borrow from other people images and strategies, and in the digital culture is definitely more evident, and it is frustrating but also stimulating in a way that like you know, thinking about what happens can create, you know, new conversations. So of course digital imaging has created a lot of frustration in photographers, and like old school photographers, and or, you know, but at the same time has also created new potential. And like, you know, I was having like with the studio mate like 5 minutes ago, like the same conversation. Who knows what photography is going to be, and like what, you know, we've gone so far. It's a very young discipline, speaking of photography, but photography is the new vernacular. I mean, like, we speak with images, we talk through images. We don't bother texting anymore. We just send an emoji, you know. That's an image. It's not a photographic image, but it's a picture, right? So in a way, like the way we process, also because of the devices and also all the tools that technology allowed us to to have, our way to process is different, and it's always been like, technology has always influenced the way we produce music, we communicate with, the telephone. Before the telephone, there was, you send a letter, and then, radio, and then TV, and then the internet. So like all this big innovation influenced the way we operate, and also the, and of course the way we make art, because we make art to comment on what happens around us, in a way.
Right. And then something to also like push against constantly too.
Of course. Yeah. Of course. There's never forget like the critique part. I mean, it's not, I sometimes I say comment, and sometimes people like say me like, hi, why do you always say comment? And it is a comment, but it's most of the time it's a critique. But it, I want to let the viewer to understand if it's a critique or not.
Yeah. This is a big conversation. Great one, but
Is there any more question, or I saw Libby is online. Nice background.
Is that real? I would guess that.
Hi.
This is, it is real. It's right by where, it's for my other job.
Nice.
One of our sites, our restoration sites. I want to participate, but I feel like I'm coming in so late. I don't want to ask.
No, exactly.
Oh no, ask a question.
If you have question, you can ask.
Well,
Or comments.
Oh no, Frank.
Well, thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us, first of all.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering how, it's like thinking about the trajectory of how you showed your work at Baxter Street. The show upstairs was so clean, and the production value, I remember thinking like, Marco knows what he's doing, like he's got this down. And then for the opening, you had that, you just completely transformed the basement. And
Oh yeah.
And you created this space for us to be able to go into that was almost like the Big Flat Now in real life, And then also the piece that you did when we did the San Gennaro Festival, where you literally created like a backdrop for us to stand in front of, and, whatever, there was like a garbage can. I mean, it was sort of a recreation of the basement. So I'm just thinking about how interesting, how these different iterations of your work, the physicality of them, like us being able to experience them in the basement, us being able to experience them in the gallery with a little bit of remove, and then having this, the Flyweight project where it's so tiny, whenever, our fingers can maybe walk in there, but they can't even walk in there because there's a glass window between us and the object, and the show. So anyway, I'm just thinking, I guess I'm wondering like what you've thought of in terms of that sort of physicality of how people are experiencing your work.
Well, it's interesting because there's I mention, when people ask me my main influence, there's two main things. There's music and there's architecture. Those are big influences in all I do. And I think like the perception of the space and like how we interact in space is very important. And when dealing with flat surfaces as photographers, because like, don't forget that as a visual artist, my main medium is photography. When dealing with photography and with the flat surface of photography, I guess there's this frustration of like trying to in a way deliver that idea not just through the three-dimensional elements in the picture itself, but also kind of expanding that. And there was some sort of frustration for me to kind of like link the musical part of my practice with the visual, bidimensional photographic still images part that for years were very different things, separated. And I guess like with the video work, the two words kind of like get together, the video work and the installation work. So like you mentioned that the installation at Baxter. I wanna share. I found a photo, an installation shot here. Let me share the screen.
I think Jesse probably helped set it up.
Yeah. So this is let me see.
Nothing to do with that one.
This image here is an installation shot of the basement at Baxter Street. So the first floor was an installation with, you know, pictures mounted on plexi, something like that. These are this was the installation, you know, fabric and you know, pictures that becomes object already, but still very on the wall. And then the basement was kind of a recreation of like kind of a back room of a bodega, like of a deli, and you know, the vernissage, the opening was like beers and stuff were there for people to grab, and there was a music. There was some music. I made a playlist with like different kind of music, from like Italian to techno to like J-Lo to like very postmodern, as I would say. But yeah, that was kind of like, I felt that the space was missing something. So when I saw the basement, and I thought about, okay, like there's an opening, let's have a party, and let's make this. And you know, thank to Christian and Rach and Jesse, that were very instrumental to you know, the realization of that. And then when you guys asked me to do the San Gennaro thing, I just thought that this would work as a perfect perfect backdrop for that project. So I just added elements. I don't know if I have an image here, but I mean, I'm sure I do, but like I might look for it for a while. But basically I added layers again, like to the image, and some basically of the some of these elements, like just like happy and sad smiley, or like the hot dog, and some of these elements were in that backdrop that people use as like a digital backdrop to take picture in. And again, like that's also like something interesting, because like that was a virtual space. So you guys photographed at the San Gennaro, you photographed people on a green screen, and then added the background later in post-production. And then the Big Flat now uses like a blue screen, which is the same idea of the green screen, as wall paint. And that's again, it's a reference of the fact that like, okay, you can put the backdrop that you want. So again, it's not about the single image, but it's about like the framework that you create, and the whole work is about that. So basically the single images can change at the same time, and they're not really as important as single images. I mean, sometimes again they are generic imagery, most of them. I mean, not all of them, but most of them. But the most important thing is like the context that you create, or that you know that you delete by putting like the blue screen. So that's the whole conversation. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if that answered the question, but like I think that like we mentioned that before in the conversation. There's always this back and forth between the flat image and the space, and how we can render the two things, but still keeping the image as like the photograph as a photograph, as an image. But you know, even when the photograph becomes an object in the big flag now, for example, it's still a photograph. It's still flat. It's like a thick. It's a thick piece of two pieces of plexi that makes it like kind of a sculpture, or kind of a monolith. But it's still a picture. It's still like flat, and you see a picture from one side and a picture from the other side. Even if it's a flag, which is like fabric, it's three-dimensional. And we have like there's one here. There's like, I mean, you can. What is it? It's three-dimensional, but it's an image. It's two images. So
I'm really enjoying the double Marco here.
Yeah.
Well, there's
on my screen. It's really funny.
Yeah, I needed it for the three for the screen share for the share screen option.
It's perfect. You were in front of your image wall. Really great. We took some shots. Thanks y'all for being.
Yeah, thank you so much for our audience. Very generous and also great questions. I hope this talk kind of gave more ideas about the project and how to think about it.
I'm looking forward to the moment when we all have the time for all the documents that did get created over the course of sheltering and creating exhibitions remotely. And we were just talking, Livy, before about like this it just became like part of the process now. It's like you don't even have to try to make documents. You have your
so much correspondence.
It is the document. It's really fascinating. But
maybe the next step is a book.
Maybe.
with all this installation shots and like video, or those augmented reality books, the one that you use your iPhone and then like you see a video and stuff like that.
Many flat nows.
Thanks so much, Marco. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you guys. Thank you, Baxter, for hosting this and for having the show up in 128. And thank you, Flyweight, for the amazing project. It was very good to work on this with you guys during this difficult time. It was something one of the things to focus on, but I think it was a good thing to make it right, even during that difficult time.
We didn't have anything going on either. It really like kept us going for like a while.
No, exactly.
It's great that there's something that people can actually interact with in that way.
Yeah, really
when
happy.
So much of art is still shut down.
Really happy that it's there, you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thanks so much.